Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Today we have an amazing podcast. Per usual, we got on Derek Tikkuri. Derek is somebody who is devoting his life to the study of Gematria. I'm not even going to explain it because I'm going to let the expert explain it. It's fascinating. We're so happy to have him here. Derek, thank you for coming. Just right off the bat, for people who do not know, can you give a layman's description of Gematria or Gematria, however you're supposed to say it?
Sure, I think both ways are good. I think classically Gematria is the right pronunciation, but technically it's geometry within language. So I like the hard G for geometry. Essentially, Gematria is this component of numerology that to me is the most ubiquitous that's out there, but is actually the lesser or least known form of numerology. And this connects to dates on the calendar, for instance. Of course, our calendar is entirely numeric.
It is widely known that the tobacco and diet industries lobby governments with scientific propaganda for years until proven guilty in court. The artificial treatment of our water is the next corporate deception.
For example, virtually every nation in Europe has rejected the use of artificial fluoride. International studies since the 40s have repeatedly shown that endocrine and neurological effects increase after repeated consumption, even at the levels accepted by U.S. government.
Epic Water Filters is the most thorough industry-grade filtration system that Houston Ensemble has ever used. They reduce heavy metals upwards of 99.5%, such as lead and mercury, bacteria like E. coli, and poisons like chromium, nitrate, and fluoride.
Join us in our journey to living a toxin-free life and get your Epic Water Filter using discount code Houston Ensemble, lowercase, one word. That's Houston Ensemble, lowercase, one word for 20% off your Epic Water Filter.
Also, properties of various planets, their magic squares, the speed, the angles of the Earth. There's something to be said for the fact that Gematria, what we're decoding, is kind of a microcosm of the macrocosm. Some people think there's a fractal nature to what we're looking at. And I would agree to that to an extent. Now, the fun part about numerology, or the mysterious part, is what we're looking at is man-made. Because this code permeates extremely when we look at mainstream news events, the deaths of famous actors, celebrities, athletes, things like that. Now, are these numeric synchronicities being forced? Are these media outlets fabricating news stories by the numbers? And again, to an extent, I think they are. And part of the reason, I believe, is because this study of Gematria numerology is connected to something called the Kabbalah. And if I could explain the Kabbalah in the most simple terms, it seems to be more of, it's not a religion, but more of a study of the spiritual science and truths of this world. Because a lot of religion will guide you to have faith and trust. Not that there's anything wrong with those, but the Kabbalah is a way of looking deeper and coming to a true, real understanding that this world that we live in, this 5-sense reality that surrounds us, is really just an illusion. It's really just the surface of a number of dimensions, realities that are beneath the surface. So I think people in high positions of power, secret societies, these occulted traditions, they seem to understand that things in this world manifest by this numeric code, and it is connected to Gematria and dates. Now, if that is true, and that our lives manifest by the numbers, if someone's trying to lie to you and instill certain thoughts in your mind or beliefs, it would make sense that they would intentionally do it by the numbers so that it mimics the universal code that on a subconscious level, we are tapped into. And I have a number of reasons I think this, particularly when people tell me what their favorite numbers are. If you decode their names or birthdays, quite often it's very clear to see that number somewhere in there. In their own numerology, their birthday, their Gematria, something like that. So yeah, there's a mix of, what is the media completely making up, and ultimately, I think for the most part, it doesn't always matter, right? Because if it's human or if it's some entity beyond what we can see and hear, something is still trying to deceive us. It's trying to distract us, keep us from ourselves. And the reason I believe that the media, these governments attack our minds so much is because they understand how powerful our minds truly are. They are creators of reality. And some people are turned off by this work because they think that what I'm saying leads them to believe that reality is scripted. It's we have no free will because everything's predetermined. I'm very against that notion, though, because I believe that reality manifests not based off of something that's been predetermined or already decided, but it changes based on our thoughts, our actions, our beliefs, and emotions. What we feel, do, say, seems to set in motion a number of events that will later manifest into reality. And this, I believe, connects to the tree of life, how there's the 10 Sephiroth. At the bottom of that tree of life, you have Yesod and Malkuth, which is representative of the earth, with Yesod as the moon. And it's almost as if they're putting a literal sense on it. Reality manifesting from this moon object, which I believe is more some sort of satellite than natural body orbiting our Earth. There's a lot of, I'm not going to get into the science of it because I'm not too sharp on it, but this, goes into the Saturn moon matrix that a lot of people have discussed. I think you said David Icke was even on your show.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's someone I've watched a lot of, and what he says is so true. And to me, it's evident by the numbers as well. In fact, Saturn takes 29.5 years to orbit the sun, whereas the moon takes 29.5 days to orbit the Earth. Now, granted, that's a lunar phase, not a sidereal, but it's very similar. And the similarities actually go down to an incredibly granular level. And without getting too confusing, the moon is 1/400th the width of the sun. And the sun is approximately 400 times further than the moon, which is why we get both annular and total eclipses. Well, those orbital periods that I just mentioned, 29 and a half, they're actually off by a little bit. And it's actually 1/400th. So like the moon takes, or Saturn, let's see. Yeah, 399 Saturnian years is like be equal to 400 lunar months. It's a concept I'm not laying out perfectly, but it's really deep. And I think, that Saturn moon matrix idea, like these are not just planets or moons, they are connected somehow to the generation of what we experience here on Earth. So
I was going to ask you a really,
but go ahead, Armin.
It's this point right here, and I didn't know where to start, so I'm just going to branch off the last thing you just said.
Sure.
So the numerology associated with the planets, their eclipses. The eclipses I know are very important, and I'd like for you to talk about that because so many powerful events occur during or in between lunar or solar eclipses. But I almost feel like you just said, the moon might be a satellite object, maybe not even an organic celestial object, maybe created.
Death Star. I mean, that's what Star Wars was kind of hinting us to it. There's more to that object.
Exactly, and it also makes me wonder if the entire solar system that we are taught in schools, I wonder if that's even accurate. Because once you go really deep into the numerology of the solar system, you see that the inverse of the tilt of the Earth is 66.666, blah, blah, blah. You see that there's so many iterations of these numbers happening over and over again. And some people will say, well, isn't that just showing you the numerological or the mathematical nature of our universe? But I'm saying is, how can we make the assumption that these data is accurate or is actually representative of something organic? There's no indication of that. And
I'm going to jump with you 1 second. Like, speaking of these numbers of creation where, carbon, 6 neutrons, protons, electrons, inverse of the Earth's tilt, 666. You, specifically, Derek, have talked about that. That might even be not in the sense accurate where 666 is evil, obviously we see it in the Bible, but then you said that we have the Papyrus 115, where they mention that it might be 616 or something like that. And that 666 is a number of creation. And I know that we had somebody who's very deep into the Gnostic tradition / Freemasonry on our show at one point, and he was saying a similar thing. But maybe you just want to jump off of what we said.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting questions about the numbers that are assigned to the solar system in particular. For instance, you mentioned the speed of the Earth, and if you look it up, what's listed as the common orbital speed of the Earth is 66,616 miles per hour. Like, it's exact. And 666 is considered the number of the beast. But then, like you mentioned, recently, within the last 20, 30 years, they came out and said, well, 616 might be the real number of the beast because of these really ancient texts they found. And some people, because of this small piece of paper that's rolled ripped up, even though it's just a little bit of verbiage, they'll say, hey, that's the real number. But I don't think that was an organic story. That was something they put out. And it's just kind of a nod to this numerology and whatnot. So when we look at the fact that the sun is 93 million miles away, well, 93 is one of the most important occult numbers. And one of the best examples I point people to is on 9/11, 2001. That second plane that hit the tower that everyone saw live, that actually happened at like the very second that the clock turned to 9:03 a.m. And then later on in the morning, George Bush is at the podium to speak for the first time. And he's looking off to the side. The clock turns to 9:30, and he turns to the camera and begins speaking. Now, there's an ancient religion called Thelema, where they literally will greet
Aleister Crowley.
each other. Exactly. They will say hi and goodbye by just reciting the number 93.
Oh, wow.
It's a religion built on will and love, two words that sum to 93 in Greek isopsephy. And then the planet Saturn, which we talked about, a lot of people call this the black sun. There's theories about how the Earth actually used to follow Saturn through the cosmos until the sun captured it. And this, Saturn in the alphabetic order sums to 93. So is it true, based on all this information, how we know the number 93 is significant? Is it true that the sun is really 93 million miles away? Now, there's a school of thought that says, no, this is all made up numerology hogwash. But then people like me also say, well, is it possible that we designed the mile based on the distance to the sun?
Right.
Because when it comes to eclipses, to me, these are things that can be measured and proven. Like, we know how far it is on the Earth. We can measure the moon's shadow and how wide it is from here. So if those numbers are wrong, then I would believe that we could prove that wrong through some sort of triangulation, specifically during eclipses. Maybe this would be a tremendous experiment for 2024 when we get another one over America. But nonetheless, I don't try to get too sidetracked with whether or not the numbers are real, because I also feel like I understand that this solar system, this planet, this realm we live in is a creation. And thus there has to be a numeric code to it. And the solar system is the best evidence. There's a really good page, which maybe I'll send you guys a link to after this, but it breaks down how the golden ratio and pi is found over and over again when you measure from one planet to the next and then relate it to the sun. The same thing with the moon and the Earth. If you put the moon right on top of the Earth and then draw a triangle with the 3 points being the center of the moon, the center of the Earth, and then the side of the Earth at the equator, you get like a perfect golden ratio connection. And in Gematria, the Pythagorean form, golden ratio equals 57. So does moon. And the word golden equals 57. And the moon has a range of 57 degrees. So it ranges 28.5 degrees north, 28.5 degrees south. So these numbers coded into, the actual gematria of the names of the planets themselves. Like we said, Saturn 93. Meanwhile, the word sun has an ordinal value of 54, and it takes Saturn exactly 54 weeks before it returns in conjunction with the sun. So I would say that there's probably something to these occulture traditions about Saturnalia and how it was the original sun. Of course, I wasn't alive back then. I don't know what that is, but it's venerated today, as we see through the media. And we had a great example in the NFL, for instance. And I'm going to share my screen, actually. If you don't mind.
Yeah. And I just watched that video that you put up regarding the Chargers player, and it is synchronistic, actually, for me that we are doing this podcast within Saturnalia. I'm correct?
Yes, we are indeed.
And, you know, we've been watching you for a while. I remember going on your website, like, probably a year ago, seeing that Gematrinator website, looking up COVID, but I had no idea you had a YouTube channel. And then later on, when Armin sent me one of your videos, I was like, oh, this is the guy. So please continue.
Yeah, certainly. And what we see in the NFL, I think, is a fun mixture of, you know, rigging, whether it's because they're trying to make money out of Vegas bets or there's some sort of ritual going on. But then you also have 22 guys on the field running each other's full speed, and people will get hurt, right? So you can't fake everything on the football field.
Mm-hmm.
But we did see something really strange happen. And in this play on Thursday Night Football, and I'm not going to play it here, but basically you had a guy who looked like he kind of hit his head, but it didn't look very bad. I mean, you see that play happen all the time. But all of a sudden, he starts reacting as if he's knocked out. And what was really weird about it is how the cameraman got right up in his face, even though he should have known something was wrong. You know, it didn't feel right. Something was weird. For the whole first half of that game, the wind was just sucked out of the stadium. Everyone was quiet. And for people who understand what the occult is doing, you know, this was an energy harvest, I think. And this is what they do. You know, people who go to these games in the first place, most of them are wearing masks. So they're already surrendering their something to this whole ritual. And then they stand there and watch while someone fakes an injury, and you know they feel horrible for most of the game. And that's what they're doing. This is all intentional, I believe, anyway. Again, I'm no doctor. Maybe he got knocked out, but the numbers are too weird. So what I pointed out about this is that it happened on the eve of Saturnalia, which starts on the 17th. It's a week-long festival. But the eve of Saturnalia this year was on a date with 69 numerology. And using the reverse alphabetic order, Z is 1, Y is 2, A through 26. Saturn sums to 69. Now, Saturn is an average of 888 million miles from the sun. This is one of those numbers that's coded alongside Saturn. Now, Donald Parham, the guy who was injured on this play, was exactly 8,888 days old. And his injury occurred exactly 93 seconds into the game, which is the number I just talked about, being connected to the ordinal value of Saturn there. Now, that would be weird enough had that happened. And in fact, it was weird enough that I made a post on it. But if you finish watching the game, you'll see it went to overtime where tight end Travis Kelce scored the game winner. And the name Travis Kelce equals 73, just like Saturnalia. Kelce was 73 days after his birthday. Even more important, he was exactly 1,680 weeks old. And 16/8 is the birthday of the tight end on the other team who got injured. And that guy's name is even connected to Kelce's birthday of 10/5. Concussion 42, like Saturn, like tight end. It was 42 weeks before Kelce's birthday. So I'm watching these plays. And then also on top of this, you have the Fox announcer, Joe Buck, make this ridiculous comment saying, hey, maybe he was shivering because he was cold, not because it had anything to do with his brain injury or whatever. And I thought, would anybody really make that comment that insensitive and that stupid if he didn't know something was going on? And I don't know, Joe Buck seems like he just doesn't give much of a Joe Buck don't give a fuck. It seems, I don't know. But yeah, this is the type of thing we see in sports every single week. There's always some major numeric ritual coming to the surface. And again, I think it's totally possible, and I vouched for the fact that some of these may be natural, but something on Saturnalia like this, when you know they're looking to suck the wind out of the stadium like this. Think back to the Las Vegas shooting. Saturn symbolism was all over that. And that was literally called the Harvest Festival. And, you know, harvesting energy, harvesting souls, whatever happened there, you know, I mean.
And, you know, I just saw in the news this morning, and because you've kind of gotten me accustomed to thinking like this, there's this rapper, Drakeo, who died yeah, I think it was yesterday or something like that.
Stabbed on the 18th, died the next day.
Okay, yeah, and I figured that you would be thinking about that. Already the name Dricchio, I'm thinking David Icke at that point. But one other thing that I wanted to say was that instance that you just talked about, for people, this is really for people who kind of don't understand what we're talking about or haven't gotten into it so much. That's almost like a light instance of Gematria, comparatively speaking, based on other things you've done, because there are
For sure.
videos that you've done or events, and we'll get into one of them here soon that we mentioned earlier.
The tornadoes, for instance, this past week would be a big one.
See, I didn't even think about that, but
Oh yeah, that was huge, and it's all connected to the eclipse code, which you wouldn't think, a weather event. Like, it's one thing to see, one or two guys on a field doing something, but for a disaster like this to happen, there's a lot of talk about weather control and what they can do.
Right.
That kind of thing is over my head, but regardless of whether it's being man-made or something more cosmic, it's by these numbers. Your
over an hour-long presentation, it was like that you presented at that
Anarchadelphia, maybe?
Yes, Anarchadelphia. That video I sent to everybody, and I was watching it, and even within the first 18 minutes, my face was melting, and I was like, oh my God. And, Armin and I specifically, and I was happy you brought it up, I've talked a lot about Freemasonry and the occult on here, and, even just seeing the symbolism within the Freemason logo and that kind of stuff is crazy. But maybe another instance that we can talk about, since Armin and I are in Houston, and this was huge, was the Astroworld event with Travis Scott. We know you did a video on that, and that was mind-blowing. Armin made a little video on it as well for our channel, and you can come at it from multiple angles. Like, even coming at it from a non-Gematria angle, you're like, oh my God, there's still so much craziness going on. And I just want people to see that, like, maybe you'll get one or two instances and you'll be like, oh, that's weird. But especially with you, Derek, you keep going with it, and you're like, oh, this really is not a coincidence at this point.
Yeah, and let me add with just one small thing, and I'd like you, Derek, to just go deep into Travis and other things. So when I was doing the Travis video, I followed the events chronologically, the time frames and everything from start to finish. And okay. I had this deep feeling that every aspect of the show was pre-planned. The events on the stage, the unfolding of the visuals, even the music, the frequencies, the point at which people started to die, and even something as simple as this, when you do a simple date calculation, from the event, from the point in which the founding of the Church of Satan occurred in San Francisco to the actual date of the event is 666 months and 6 days.
Yep.
Now, that's kind of a big coincidence. You couple that in with the fact that there's an obsession with dark satanic imagery in Travis's music, but also his wife loves to look like the mother of darkness in certain advertisements where she's drenched in blood, and it's all very dark. So it just goes on and on and on.
And the birthday of Chris
and his Kris Jenner's his mother-in-law's birthday is also her 66th birthday that occurred on the date of the show. Now, lastly, I'm trying to be careful with what I say, because to me, when I think about this, like you were talking about synchronicities, it crystallizes so quickly. I see all the angles happening in my mind at the same time. So it's difficult for me to even know where to begin, because I could start anywhere. But
and you should just briefly tell them about the Skull and Bones.
Well, when I was working on the Matrix Gematria video, I was thinking about how some of the ciphers were giving me a lot of 322 numerology. And then I realized there's also a lot of 47, numerology going on in the Matrix, Neo the One, and it's all coming up again and again. And you're the one who taught me the Masonic compass and the degrees that it's laid out in. How 47 is significant because it's the top corner, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was I gonna say? But let me just finish off.
Later found the skull and bones.
Yeah. Later that day, I had to take a break because it was just a little too much for me. So I went down to get some food, and the guy that parked next to me had a Freemasonic logo on his car with the skull and bones in the center of it, which I had never seen before. You usually see them separate, right?
Yeah, I think I made a graphic like almost as a joke on my blog, putting the skull and bones inside the Freemasonry compass because there was something that was connected to it, but I never knew that it was actually a real thing. Is that something you see often in Houston at all? Or is that...
Now, you see a lot of Freemasons in Houston. It's an infestation of Freemasons in Houston.
Big city down there, yeah.
Yes, and other things going on, like all the trafficking. I mean, even people who aren't into this stuff know Houston's a center for trafficking.
Or even on the first day, a little while back on our channel, we were wanting to do more of like street interviews, go downtown, interview people about what was going on in the world. The first night that we ever did it and went out, it was a giant Freemason
like convention
for the Shriners, and we talked to, and they all had their hats on and everything, and of course they didn't really want to talk too much.
Yeah,
and they're very weird.
Imagine that.
The point I'm getting at here, and then you can have like the whole rest of the show there, is when I was saying that I can't be certain of all of these numbers that they're giving us about astrological properties. I'm not saying that those astrological objects don't exist, but what it's beginning to look like is that they've created a unit of measurement or units of measurement that allows them to control, to an extent, the numerology of events that are occurring. So it's the system that they adopted and now they are using in effect to construct this matrix, as it were. Does that kind of make sense to you? Would you agree with that?
That is how I see it. I mentioned earlier, I'm more prone to believe that these measurements were designed because of like the distances. So, I mean, what the hell is a mile? Like 5,280 feet? What is that? Who came up with that? Right. An acre is like a land of area that an ox can mow in a day. Like, these measurements, I think, were designed because they found that that's the number they could go with and get, based on the natural geometry of the solar system, you're going to get, significant numbers with all of these measurements, just based on how those connections work. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's kind of a deeper topic. I do kind of feel that way. And again, like numbers, at least what we see, these are man-made symbols or sigils even, that I would argue kind of have their own power to an extent. And by displaying numbers, showing numbers, or even talking numbers through Gematria, maybe, it's kind of like a way of subconscious programming, perhaps. And I think when it comes to like subconscious programming, that was pretty prevalent, I think, at the Travis Scott show. Excellent. So yeah, you mentioned the Church of Satan, how this was all connected. And this was kind of the first thing everybody pointed out, is that it felt satanic. I heard a lot of people say that. People who weren't even religious, coming to these realizations that something was going on in front of them. Now, the Church of Satan has an establishment date, and it was founded in the year 66, right? They love the six. But the date was April 30th of 66. And April 30th is also the birthday of Travis Scott. So right off the bat, you get this pretty bizarre coincidence. Now, when you measure from Travis Scott's birthday, and it's worth pointing out that these birthdays change frequently. So if you go down to the bottom of Wikipedia,
that's right,
you'll actually see that it says, there's a category, it says 1992 births, right? Like he's born in 1992. Well, it says 1991. Well, that's because they changed it recently. And they'll change these birthdays and numbers for these rituals, I think. So, I mean, there's no other explanation that I can think of. But anyways, if you measure from this new birthday they gave him to the date of the Astroworld tragedy, you get 366 months and 6 days. And if you measure to the Church of Satan founding, as you mentioned, 666 months and 6 days. So again, is 666 an evil number? I would argue it's definitely not, but it's one they want to make us think is evil or take control of. Now, not only were these 666 alignments here, but even the Houston Astrodome, which was the first thing that came to mind when I heard Houston Astroworld, right? Being a sports fan, I'm familiar with the Astrodome, the first big dome stadium. Well, that stadium opened 20,666 days before the event, even on the 99th day of the year. And Travis Scott's full name, which, by the way, was also changed. This Berman used to be A-N, but they changed it to O-N. And when you change it to this, you get Gematria of 1666 in English extended, which is our essentially the same as Hebrew Gematria, Greek isopsephy. And then even in the square number cipher, you get 3999. And he had the 3666 in his age. There was also a strong 911 code in here, which is more than I really want to dive into. But when we talk about creation, the number 6, this is all connected to eclipses as well. So a lot of people understand that, you know, we're made of carbon, which is the 666 element, protons, neutrons, electrons. There's also 6 lunar phases between almost every eclipse. So the vast majority of eclipses fall 6 lunar phases after the last one. And then there's a little bit of a staggering at the end of the cycle and whatnot. But that's what it all ties down to, I believe. In Greek isopsephy, now there's 2 languages I talk about the most in addition to English. English to me is the most important because it's the language that's been pushed to the entire world, right? So it's almost as if there's a form of spell casting, it's their way of waving the wand over most of the world at once. But this language evolved from previous languages, most recently Latin. And this Jewish cipher on the site is essentially the Latin alphabetic order. And the letters at the end, J, V, and W, were the letters that were added to English after Latin. And then, of course, Hebrew Gematria, the original language of the Old Testament, which kind of fed into Greek. So it's like this chain of Hebrew, Greek, Latin, and English. And again, I don't get too sidetracked with different languages, but in Greek, they coded the number 911 for total eclipse. So when you write out total eclipse, you get a 911 value. Well, 911 is a prime number. That would be the 156th prime number. And in Hebrew, eclipse equals 156. And an eclipse always happens 1, 5, or 6 lunar phases after the last one. Here you see Houston, Texas in ordinal as the 156.
Oh.
And this was 156 days before the anniversary of the eclipse that passes nearby Houston in 2024. So it seems to be a combination, right? They look for dates that have significant numbers. They look for characters, such as Travis Scott, who will have significant numbers in his age on that date. And then you combine it with like an astrological riddle, whether it's an eclipse or some sort of conjunction. Now, I talk about eclipses. I almost feel like I mentioned them too much on my channel and not enough other things. But, you know, when you think about it, what's the most significant astrological event? You know, an eclipse is the only thing you really can see happening from the Earth, unless you know you're looking for a certain conjunction or whatever. Like an eclipse is like, boom, like there it is in the sky, especially the total eclipses. And for anyone who hasn't seen a total eclipse, I would urge you to make every effort to see the 2024 one over the United States. I went to go see the one in 2017. And like, I would not have even predicted the emotional response I'd have to it because it's such this magnificent image and everyone around you is like going into hysteria. It's this wild thing. And there's something to be said for how it like maybe sucks up some sort of energy or consciousness from the Earth. I don't know, redistributes it. Just theory, but there's some sort of power behind eclipses, I think. And to me, the occult probably understands this. And whether or not the current pandemic is completely staged or if it was released, through history, we've seen plagues break out that are in concert with significant eclipses.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll get back to this Houston thing in a second if you don't mind, but you go back to 1918. So in 2017, the eclipse that we had that went from coast to coast, this was the first coast-to-coast total eclipse since the year 1918. And 1918 just happens to be the year that we had the Spanish flu pandemic.
Mm.
And of course, that pandemic was neither Spanish nor was it a flu. But yeah, 1918 is when this broke out. And it broke out in a military base. What are the odds of that? And it just happened to be soldiers who, a lot of these guys had gotten shots.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a lot of theories about the electrical grid and new improvements that were going on around the time and how that may have contributed to people's disease. Because I'm a big proponent of the fact that disease is not just some contagious virus you get from somebody. A disease is a response to the toxins you put in your body and the toxins in the environment outside of it, one of which includes electromagnetic frequency, which we are experiencing at a very, very high rate, higher than any time in human history, which is why I wear a little tool like this around my neck, similar to the pyramids I sleep by. These are like energy shields, more or less, that absorb and rechannel these frequencies so that they don't affect the body. And when you look at the symptoms of electromagnetic poisoning to the body in connection to COVID, you see startling similarities. So I would always argue that that's a big part of this. But yeah, so this pandemic was the last total eclipse we had over America. And think about the Black Plague. Now, Black Death, it says it started in 1346. However, that's the European plague. The plague actually began in Asia in the year 1331. This is another big eclipse I talk about. I'm not going to bore your listeners with too many details on it, but essentially there's a really big eclipse in 1331 that the Latin cipher seems to be heavily coded around. And that was the year that Black Death first showed up in Hubei, China, which is the same province where coronavirus came from.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, just touching back on the Astroworld, because there were some really alarming synchronicities in addition to what I shared already. Now, the following morning after the Astroworld tragedy, news broke that a famous bodybuilder, a guy who won Mr. Olympia just like 3 years ago, he had died suddenly, and it was really mysterious. Well, he was 46 years old, which is the value of Houston, Texas. It's also the value of Astroworld, 46, commonly a number of sacrifice. And would you believe that on his last Instagram post, he put the quote, "See you on the other side."
Oh, that's right. You said that. Oh.
Which is insane because at the Travis Scott concert, "See ya on the other side" is what literally a lot of people was like, that was the last thing they saw as they were dying on stage. And then later that day, we had the death of a musician named Astro from the band UB40, famous reggae band that was big in the 90s. So what are the odds of that? How many musicians are named Astro? Like, probably just this guy as far as collective consciousness is concerned, and he just happens to die the next day. And of course, there's all connected numbers. This Jesuit eclipse code, which I commonly talk about, was big.
So, Derek, somebody who's watching this who maybe is like less sympathetic, than we are just because of our perspective differences, would say, wow, that is weird. How, and I know we kind of touched on this earlier and it's very ambiguous, but how might this be created? Is it something that's literally embedded into our reality in a way that manifests by itself? Like it's like creating itself through this? Or, is there a group of people at a table saying he dies today? And, none of them seem good to me exactly, but it's very complicated.
I hear you. I don't know personally. And I'll preface my theories and opinions with the fact that I don't know. I think it might even be a little bit of everything. Some of these people who die mysteriously in the news, they're probably murdered. Maybe, I don't know. I don't try to tell people they're murdered because it's a very dark thing to say, and I don't know. I'm just running the numbers. It seems to me like that's probably happened. But again, why are they being murdered by the numbers? And to me, this occult, again, they're not stupid, they're not ignorant. They're aware of processes going on at a very high level. So this is something I do touch on this in my work occasionally, but what I think is that there is a natural code of mortality or death in this world. And you can't not die by the numbers. It's almost impossible. Like every time we decode a death, and the reason I say this especially is because not just family members or friends that I know of who have passed away, but when you look at the death of a 98-year-old senator, for example, like Bob Dole, who died a couple of weeks ago, if you're telling me that he got murdered by the numbers, you're also telling me that for 97 years, they decided we're not going to kill this guy. We're going to let him die naturally. But then once he turned 98, they're going to say, oh, you know what? Let's kill him by the numbers. That to me is ridiculous. So to me, when we look at the death of a 98-year-old man, even the death of a 108-year-old woman or 107, which just happened, there's still numbers to be found, connections between the dates and their gematria every time. So my belief is that they understand. I'm not the first person to build a gematria calculator and look into these things, I don't think. I mean, there were several online before mine, but I think people have been doing this for a long time and come to an understanding long before us. So what we see with these rituals is, I believe, them mimicking the natural code of death or mortality that exists in this matrix. And again, it's an unsettling thought to everybody that, maybe the day you died is already set in stone. But again, I believe that there are many dates that your name lines up to. How you live your life, your actions, your thoughts, your beliefs will determine which one of those may pass away. There's a number of different things, because I think we're all here on a path. We're all here with a purpose, and it's up to us to find that purpose. And if we don't, maybe we'll meet our demise a little early. You know what I mean? It's kind of it's a dark thought for a lot of people to think about, but I'm trying to be as real as I can with this research. And just based on my observation, there's zero chance that everything we're decoding is guys sitting at a table. That's definitely not the case. At the very most, it's people who understand that there's this code. There's certain numbers which may repeat more frequently than others. And those are the numbers that not only will they attribute in these rituals, but that they will also stamp themselves with. So in the case of the Jesuit order, for instance, I commonly do posts connecting this Jesuit order numerology to a death. Now, does that mean the Jesuit order did it and that they're trying to take claim of it? Or does it mean that they simply stamp themselves with those numbers I was talking about? So that when we see it, our minds think, hey, it's the Jesuits, when for all we know, it could be God or whatever force is causing this. I think it's fair to say there's some gray area in that, because, there are powerful people out there, but I think we give them too much credit, right? I mean, for a lot of people who come to my work, they'll say, hey, everyone in Hollywood is compromised. They're all actors. But I don't see that as the case. I think there's a lot of people in there who have just been successful, and maybe they don't tread the normal company line in Hollywood. And you'll see that from time to time. They get canceled, they get suppressed, whatever it is. I mean, there's plenty of evidence that there's real people in Hollywood. I just think a lot of them know deep down there's something darker going on and rather shut up. That seems to be the case.
Derek, have you ever seen that movie Wanted, I think, with Angelina Jolie and...
they curve the bullets?
The bullet curving movie where there's also Morgan Freeman on it. Well,
I believe so. But go ahead.
I think you will find that fascinating because the core of that movie, or the larger conspiracy that's unveiled in that movie, is that Morgan is in control of an ancient spiritual machine that's able to decode events. I think in this movie, the machine threads, it creates patterns in thread, and then this pattern gives them a number, which then tells them what is going to happen to who. Sure. And only the high priests, which Morgan and a select few other people, have the knowledge to decode the machine and also tell their goons what to do. So
Well,
go ahead. Yeah, what were you going to say?
I think that's something I kind of left out on. I should have tapped into a little bit more. Is that's sort of an alternate view on this thing? Is that it's not necessarily that they're the ones doing it, and the reason we have all these synchronicities, but that someone out down the line actually knew ahead of time that that's what happened. So a lot of people talk about The Simpsons and how that show has an insane amount of predictive programming and future predictions that seem to come true. But one thing I very rarely hear people talk about is their Arnold Palmer synchronicity. So there was a new episode of The Simpsons that aired on a Sunday night. And in the episode, Homer's in the kitchen with Marge, and he's got a squirt gun. He's like, I'm going to stand around this corner with some iced tea. Lenny's going to stand over there with some lemonade. And then we're going to jump out and give someone an Arnold Palmer. And Marge looks at him and says, really? An Arnold Palmer? And Homer's like, yeah, an Arnold Palmer. And it's really awkward. That episode aired like a half hour after the news of the death of Arnold Palmer came. Really strange stuff.
Oh, wow.
And people have accused Matt Groening of like being a time traveler or whatever. Well, what the hell was that? You know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, Arnold Palmer, an 87-year-old man, same thing as Bob Dole. I mean, most people don't live that long. If he was murdered, that means they would have let him live. No, I think it's more likely they knew he was going to die on that day, or someone did.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's Matt Groening himself or a network that filters down to the producers of The Simpsons, I'm not sure. But that to me is a clue for us, people who are looking for more of reality. Hey, that episode aired and that guy died the same day. How is that possible? There must be some deeper knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when we talk about Freemasons and occultists and stuff, I don't think they're all evil. You know, I think a lot of them are maybe swimming in evil spirits that they're not aware of. But consider if you yourself went into one of these organizations and got this amazing wealth of information, but you also swore that you would like give people permission to murder you if you ever broke the secrets.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what some of these oaths in Freemasonry, talking about like tying your intestines around your neck and getting stabbed and stuff. It's insane. So these people they know that they have a spiritual contract not to divulge these secrets, but they still want to divulge the secrets. So they do it in a coded way, in a way that they can't be called out for by their fellow brethren. They do it in a way that kind of just, you know, throws a leash around the public and kind of tugs them a little bit like, hey, there's this dimension of reality too. That's why so much truth is hidden in movies and film. I mean, we're in a state now where you will get 10 times more truth in a Hollywood action blockbuster than you will on the nightly news. But that's what they're doing. They're putting the truth in fiction. They're putting the fiction in truth to turn everything upside down, which in turn keeps people in a permanent state of confusion. And no better evidence of that manifesting can be seen outside of coronavirus, where people still, after 2 years, are still confused. Like, oh, I just think they're trying to do their best. Really? After all this time? Like, how much propaganda do you have to eat up after all this time to actually think that these people are trying to save you?
Yeah.
Blows my mind.
We're now being exposed more than ever to the truths of real mind control experiments, the Milgram experiment, MK Ultra. Now MK Ultra is like widely accepted by everybody, even non-conspiratorial minded people.
Yeah, they named a Mortal Kombat game MK Ultra.
Exactly.
It's in the culture now.
And from the spiritual argument, one might say, because, you know, I'm going to be a little bit esoteric right here, so take it with a grain of salt. But if we are a creation of God and we are divine creations, we literally are nuclear reactors of potential. So what do you do with billions of people that have immense divine potential? You create a substrate for them to live in so that they can never understand what they are.
Bingo.
And you do this constantly so that they can never escape it. So now, I have a lot of questions. This might turn into a 2-hour thing. I don't know.
By the way, real quick.
Yeah.
Because I didn't ask you at the very beginning, what time do you have to be off? Because we want to respect your time.
Oh, I think 2 hours is good. We can do 2 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
So you mentioned the Tree of Life, and I've been avoiding studying the Tree of Life because I didn't even want my energy dissipated into it in any regard. I wanted a wall between me and that whole study. But inevitably, I find myself looking into it, and you mentioned the Sephiroths. So I'm looking at the Matrix Numerology, and I'm wondering if you can shed some light into a couple of things. So they mentioned, for example, that the Hebrew Gematria of Metatron is 314. I don't know if you've heard about that, but where can I access a calculator that I can actually punch in like the actual Hebrew alphabet and get those?
Yeah, my website does have Hebrew and Greek on
Okay.
it. So let's pop this up real quick. When you go to the ciphers link above the calculator, you'll get a drop down, and even on the main site, there's this category that says foreign.
Mm-hmm.
And the only foreign languages I have on the primary calculator are Hebrew and Greek. Again,
Mm-hmm.
trying to limit it a little bit to what I think is most relevant to English.
Mm-hmm.
So the 4 Hebrew methods here that you see are
Mhm.
basically identical to what you have with the ordinal and reduction methods.
Mm-hmm.
Always got it. Yeah.
Yeah, so Hebrew reduction 1 through 9, 1 through 9, 1 through 9. Hebrew ordinal is 1 through 22.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and then Hebrew has a number of other characters called suffix.
Mm-hmm.
And these are similar to other characters, but they have their own properties. So there's this Hebrew Gematria excludes those. So we go 1 through 9, 10 through 90, 100, 400. But if you include these other characters as separate characters, then you go up to 900.
Mm-hmm.
And these 4 methods are pretty relevant.
Okay.
In fact, I share Hebrew Gematria more than Greek for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of nuggets there.
Mm-hmm.
I do not remember Metatron itself, but I've heard that it's a 314.
We're gonna say
Derek, while you're looking that up, I just want to say something for people who this is new for. There's a really fantastic presentation by Randall Carlson who did a presentation on basically sacred geometry and how basically there's messages coded into buildings. You know, best example would be the pyramids, but also the Parthenon. In the Bible, you know, different phrases of the Bible have specific gematria. But one thing that I think is important to note is that in Hebrew, they, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm just quoting Randall Carlson here, in Hebrew, they don't have a difference between A and 1. So they don't have a separation of alphabet and numerical system. It's all 1. So, you know, if you say like some phrase in Hebrew, the numbers are already coded into the phrase, which I think gives like a gravitas to the gematria of their words. Does that sound right?
Yeah, absolutely. And when I describe Gematria, like to open the show, I should point that out, that these ancient languages, Hebrew and Greek as the prime examples, they did not have separate numbering systems. If you wanted to write the number, 612, for instance, you would write the letter that's worth 600, the letter that's worth 10, and then the letter that's worth 2. And it would be the same characters that are actually in a word. So when humans first began writing language, there was no separation between numbers and letters. They were literally identical. Now, you tell people that, hey, our alphabet is numbered today, most people will laugh at you, but it's like, that's how it started. This is
Right.
not a new concept. And a lot of people say, well, Gematria has to only be relevant in Hebrew because that's where it started, that's where the Bible is. But what I argue is that this code, this manifestation power is linked to our consciousness.
Yeah.
So whatever alphabet we are born into and speak and understand, and we grew up with an alphabetic order. We didn't just, in each classroom, they didn't just throw 26 random letters all over the board. There's an order to it, an order that we've been accepting since a very young age. And I think that has power to it to some extent. So, but yeah, absolutely, Hebrew is very vital to Gematria. And there are more logical riddles within the words of Gematria in Hebrew. So like the fact that, child matches mother and father, for instance, things like that. I find a lot of stuff like that all over the language. Things that aren't necessarily present in English, although through English you can see nods to those codes. So real quick, I mentioned how Eclipse is 156 in Hebrew. I closed the post, but The number 156 is also the value of 33 in the alphabetical order. And the word eclipse in English is 33. So it's like another bridge from one language to another.
Mm-hmm. How much? Okay, so I'm gonna ask you a couple of things, and if you don't know about it, it's totally fine. But one thing that was kind of confusing me the other day, because I was trying to figure out the significance of 314. I'm gonna go back to the Matrix again because it's coming out in a couple of days, and that's the first movie I'm going to see in many, many years.
Okay.
Because I know they're gonna fill it up with all sorts of imagery and numerology. And so when the keymaker in Matrix Reloaded was talking about there being 314 seconds between the time they turn off the energy grid to the time that Neo can actually go through the door and meet the architect. 314, when the keymaker described that window of time, he said that is the breadth and width of time that we have. So he described that period of time as being constructed of two elements. And in the Tree of Life studies, there's the concept of Chibur, Chibur, which is a combining. I know you have some insane stuff.
And 3.14 is pi, right?
3.14 is pi, right? And so now, I was looking into it, and someone's analysis said that female or Trinity, the word female in Hebrew is 157. And when Neo meets Trinity and reveals to her purpose, that there is a chibur, or a combining of those energies, and what happens when you combine an energy is you multiply it. I don't know how they decide how many times to multiply it, but the first multiplication is 2, right? Because that's when you actually get a multiple. And the multiple of the Hebrew word for feminine, which is nufke, is 157. Multiplied by 2 is 314.
That's correct. I just verified that, in fact.
Okay. And do you have that? This is all getting to the point. Do you have like a list of significant numbers and their meanings? Like you said that this is a ritual sacrifice number that's very prevalent. Do you have like a list of numbers and their significances?
Well, the closest thing I have to a list would be the database, like the match database. That's on the standard calculator, which personally I don't even actually use. I've been doing this for 5 years, so when I see certain numbers, like they link to certain codes, and then if that thread continues to persist while I'm decoding, then I'll make a post about it or something. I kind of, I don't actually get into the meanings of numbers so much as you would expect, maybe. That's one of the most common questions I get is, hey, my name sums to these numbers. Can you tell me what this means or what it means for me? And one thing I always talk about is that the word numbers has perfect overlap with duality, right? I always bring this up. And to me, it just states that, a number does not have a definition. A number can be assigned to many things.
Oh, wow.
It's just like when you combine the whole picture and see the whole tapestry put together, only then do the threads and patterns really emerge. So I don't personally have a list. I just have at this point, I have a brain full of numbers that are connected to one another.
Well, that's what I figured. Yeah.
I mean, when you mentioned 314, of course, I'm thinking pi, because pi is not only significant to the solar system and whatnot, but it's coded into our language too. When you think about the smallest equation on a calculator that can give you pi for the first 3 digits of pi, 22 divided by 7 gives you 3.14 on a calculator. And that's always really cool. But when you write out 22 divided by 7, you get 314.
Oh, wow. Oh, it's so crazy.
And when you write out, think about how many degrees are in a circle, right? 360. Well, look at this. You get 227, like the equation that gives you pi.
Ah. Huh. So you got to be aware to remember that.
True. So like the circle, we have a circle in our language, the letter O, right? So O is the 15th letter. And when you write out 15th, It's like, hey, the 15th letter is a circle, right? It tells us that in the reverse order. And then you get the 93 in ordinal. We talked about this. But the other one, if I can remember. Notice how in Latin gematria, this O is worth 50. And when you write out circle, it sums to 50 in English. So the circle is like heavily coded into the language to an extreme extent. So when I think of pi, 3.14, right? In Latin gematria, you get this number, 888. That's 6 circles. And when you write out 6 circles, it sums to 609, which is a lot like pi, which is 69. And then circles is 69 in English.
God.
And then look at eclipse, the 2 circles intersecting in the sky. In eclipse, 69, 33, just like circles. So you mentioned the United States of America. Well, check this out. So in Hebrew, if I write out and pull out the Hebrew ordinal method, and this is United States of America, right? You see it right there. United States of America sums to 227.
What is 22
now this is
divided by
that
7?
pi number, right? 22 divided by 7. Also, if you write out total eclipse, I have to find this. So this is like, this word is eclipse, and then this word is full. And in Hebrew Gematria, like the larger method, it sums to 227. And think about this in terms of the twin eclipses, right? We're talking about the pi code 227. In Hebrew, both total solar eclipse and United States of America is 227, which is another reason why I thought these 2 eclipses would be so significant. And of course, we get the coronavirus, the corona, the atmosphere of the sun, only visible during an eclipse. I had one more that I was going to point out. United States. So I had this up earlier. United States in ordinal is 157, which is half of pi, or 314. And earlier you mentioned the number 322 and how it relates to skull and bones.
Yes.
Skull and Bones puts it on their logo. Well, isn't it interesting that when you write out skull and crossbones, you get 223. And we know how they like to flip everything backwards, 322. However, the reason this number is so significant, 223, well, there's 2 reasons. First is the Saros. And the Saros is our eclipse cycle.
Oh, that's right.
So every 223 lunar phases, we get an eclipse from the same Saros. But look what happens when you write out 223. It's the first number that sums to pi, 314.
Wow.
And it's the same thing, 322, you get the same value, 314.
Jeez.
And then, okay, so if you add 223 to 232 to 322, look what you get, 777. Now, if you do not include the word and, 777 is the other first number that sums to pi, 314.
Wow. How did you get, okay, were you experimenting when you're seeing these connections? Do you get any sort of inspiration? Are you to the point finally after these many years that you kind of have like a gut instinct for where to look for a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I first started decoding, like I could show you some really old blog posts. They're terrible. They don't make any sense. I read them now and I'm like, what was I doing? Now, I could have stayed very simple with Gematria. When I learned Gematria, it was a very basic, simple thing. And it was so simple, I was like, how can something this obvious be so hidden? It doesn't make sense. So it's not that I was skeptical because I understood numbers were important. I was not always a conspiracy theorist, so to speak, but I always had my doubts about what was going on. So when I saw someone else teaching Gematria, I was like, this is either completely batshit crazy, or this is something that really, really needs to be looked into. So I said, all right, I'm going to look into this, and because I've always been one to do my own investigations. I'm self-taught in pretty much everything I've learned. So the first thing I did was decode all the words in the Bible. I decoded the entire calendar, all the numbers, how we spell them, like you just saw. And right away, I picked up on patterns just like what I showed you. And I was like, whoa, do these people teaching Gematria know about these patterns? And I found that I was largely being ignored, at least at first. And I was like, okay, I gotta do my own thing. So I made the calculator to get this out there. And yeah, I mean, at first I was pretty, I guess you could say I was sort of obsessed with the Gematria of things. Like I was always like, what's the Gematria of that? Or I would see something and I'd be like, what's the Gematria of that? Without enough attention being paid to the symbolism that those things were representing. So when people first find Gematria, and I see this on my Discord, where people come in, they're brand new, they will give me Gematria of everything under the sun. They'll give me just a wall of text and numbers. And it's like, oh, here. And I'm like, what does this even mean? There's no like theme, there's no thread, there's no story. It's just numbers. So what I encourage people to do is just use their most logical part of their brain, like sit back and think. Now, my goal in my older videos, after someone died or some big news event would happen, I would say, I got to get a video out on this right away. Because the quicker I get the video out, the more people that are searching for it on YouTube will find my video, the more people that'll start waking up to Gematria. Well, I can't really do that anymore because YouTube censored my channel. So you can't find my videos until you get to like page 20. So what that caused me to do is say, okay, after something happens, I'm going to take a step back, like read about the story, look it up in the news, see what kind of connections I can see, and then even sleep on it sometimes, and then come back the next day.
Yeah.
And then say, all right, what are the most logical connections? What can I show that will do the best job of showing someone that this language is redundant or relevant? And I think the best way to do that is show how redundant it is. And sometimes, I mean, I'll be honest, I'll be doing a video on YouTube talking about these numbers. And in my head, I'll be like, I feel repetitive because I'm saying the same things over and over. Am I programming people by saying these numbers over and over? But how else to get the point through that these certain numbers are so significant than to show how they're coded throughout the same exact type of news story over and over?
Derek, I will literally pay you money if you create a glossary or index of significant numbers and like with each number, some like really powerful examples and how they tie into things. If you have like a simple glossary like that and you turn it into a book or something that people can download for some money, I'll be the first one to get that. Okay, I'm just letting you know right now.
Yeah, cool. Yeah,
and I mean, yes,
it's in the works probably. Yeah.
Okay, good. And then now, what really struck me, what you just said, when I was doing the Matrix Gematria, the first day was so hard. I knew that there was a wall that I had to break to finally get into it.
Yeah.
And then I slept on it, like you just said. I was like, I can't do this. This is like too much. Like I felt it creeping in, but then I couldn't break through it. And then the next day, it was like an explosion. I was like, holy moly, it's all connected. And they've encoded the entire movie with Kabbalistic terms. Now, speaking of the Kabbalah.
Oh, and don't remind me that I have to say something about the Torah at some point.
Okay, the Torah.
Cannot forget that.
Please tell us all you know about Thelema, Aleister Crowley, his influence on the study of Gematria, and the systems he uses, ALW, Kabbalah, blah, blah, blah. Anything you know, please.
Okay, I mean, I guess I got a little bit with that. So Aleister Crowley, let's just bring him up real quick for my own sake, and then I'll share my screen while I'm at it. I won't say this is putting me on the spot because I do know a little bit here. All right, so we got Aleister Crowley, we got Thelema. All right. So you have Aleister Crowley, who was very involved in Thelema, and the ciphers that you mentioned, they're listed as Kabbalah ciphers on my website. And the first one is ALW, and this is actually a pretty simple cipher in how it's constructed. You basically start with A as normal, and then you just jump forward 11 letters. So L would normally be the 12th, W the 23rd, and then you just reset the alphabet. So you go from 23 to 26, which is 3, and then you go 8 more. Then you get to H. So that's how this cipher is constructed. And based on this, we have a 26-letter alphabet. It wouldn't work like this in every alphabet. Eventually, you'd run into the same letter. but based on the symmetry, so to speak, of the language, this works. And
Mhm.
11 is considered to be the first master number, the first rep digit, also a prime number. And 11 is actually the fifth prime number, which is why I think Saturn being 511 is significant.
Mm.
But anyway, in this method, Saturn is 73. It's an important number to Saturnalia, which equals 73. And this is also the 21st prime number. Notice how Saturn equals 21.
Mm.
This is actually a really important, not to get sidetracked, I'll get back to Aleister in a second, but this is an important prime relationship. The reason I say that is because 21 is 7 times 3, and the 21st prime number is 73. Now, the only other number that's like this is a number you've probably heard of, 187, the homicide code. And 187 is 11 times 17. And the 187th prime number is 1117. So these numbers are just special for those reasons. Now, the Kfw cipher is actually structured off of ALW. So you start with the ALW cipher in this order here. And then you do something called a 9/11 jump, as I call it anyway, where they start on K, and then I have a spreadsheet where this is all laid out better, but basically you go ahead 11 unless you get to the end of the alphabet, and then you go 9, something like that.
Okay.
And then there's this Lch cipher, and I'll be honest, I have no idea how the Lch cipher is constructed. I believe this is probably based on Hebrew letters, some sort of symbolism with them. I don't even know. But
Okay.
And to be honest, I don't decode in these ciphers very often anymore. I've kind of dropped them off of my work because I'm trying to keep things a little more focused.
Yeah.
But yeah, these methods are largely credited, and these are more commonly called the English Kabbalah. And sometimes you see it spelled like QU or QA, like that.
There's 42 for you right there.
Yeah, man, this 42 is huge. Like
Yeah.
mathematics is 42, or math is 42, I mean. Right? And architect, 42.
Forward.
Do you
Astrology
think that
is 42.
you know the book Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Sure, yeah, 42 is supposed to be like the key to the galaxy or something, right?
Right. It's
42
like
is according
the
to
answer to the
exactly
universe.
And in Kabbalistic literature, 42 is the length of the actual name of God. 42 letters. Yeah. There's also a lot of 42 in the Matrix. A lot of 42 in the Matrix. But
Yeah,
please go on about Thelma.
Sure. So the two main principles of Thelema, you see here, there's like core topics, right? So the book of the law is called Liber al Vigus,
Yeah.
and this is called the Book of the Law. This is written by Aleister Crowley, and is what a lot of this is based out of. And then you see the number 93, just like a number 93. And this gets into the whole occult tradition. So the two big concepts of Thelema are will and, I guess this says purpose or love. So let's look at Greek isopsephy. Foreign Greek, punch these. And these Greek ciphers, again, the same as English and Hebrew, right? You have your reduction, your ordinal, and then your extended method. And notice how the word will sums to 93. And this is essentially what the whole thing is based off of. Will, and then this one. Now, I know this isn't the word, actually. Let me go to translate.
And just to point out for people who might not be as aware, maybe this is not even too accurate, but the Thelema logo is essentially the Freemason logo.
Yeah.
Here we go. So the
Just
word
to show
love
relation
is 93.
Gotcha.
Love and will, both 93. So those are the key numbers of this. And actually, what this symbol is representative of, I think, is the Sigil of Saturn. So I'll show you this. So Saturn has a sigil, and this is based on the magic square. So every planet that we can see with our eyes anyway has a magic square. And Saturn, because it's the furthest, has the smallest magic square, 3 by 3. And when you trace the numbers 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 across the square, you get a shape that looks like this, which is extremely similar to Thelema, right?
Mhm.
It's almost identical.
Yeah.
And remember, the number is 93, which is Saturn is 93.
Mm-hmm.
Can you, because I don't know actually, can you explain the magic square
Yeah.
and the planets? I have no idea.
Yeah, I wish I had a little more info on like the origin of these things, but
Or even just
pull up the website.
where the drawing comes from. Yeah, even just bringing that up would be helpful.
you know, like I
Basically-
said, I haven't done enough research into the origin of these things. But I can pick up on why each planet has its certain square, right? So the largest magic square is the moon. That's because the moon is obviously the closest celestial body to the Earth. Now the moon is a 9 by 9 square. And what's so cool about these squares is that they will equate, like each row and column in the square has the same sum.
Hmm.
And bear with me while I pull up a file that's better at this. Because I have a cool little Excel file.
Oh,
There you
you
go.
would. Thank you.
Of course. So if you highlight every column here or every row, no matter what you do, you always get a sum of 369.
Huh. 369. Okay.
Right. And then if you add up the entire magic square, there's 81 tiny squares. So the sum is the 81st triangular number, which is 3321.
Mm.
And check this out in Gematria. If you write out, get rid of these extra ciphers here. So, magic square of the moon. And look at this, it's 99 and 99. And the magic square is 9 by 9.
Ah,
Not only that, but the moon equals 99. And the moon, the number most coded with the moon is 666 and 13. And 13 equals 99. It's the only number to sum to 99.
wow.
But notice this 3321. This is a huge one, man. And they code it into everything.
Mm.
Do you know the name of the Nazi scientist who was
Mengele?
Joseph? Or Goebbels?
I'm
Werner
quizzing
von
you, but I'm
Braun.
also
Oh,
putting
Werner
the
von
name on the
Braun.
screen.
The NASA
So
guy.
yeah, this was a Nazi scientist who came by. He was responsible for NASA and ultimately the moon missions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And look how he has this ridiculous long name, Werner Magnus Maximilian Breyer Feinbaum.
Mm-hmm.
And look at this, 3321,
Oh,
the big moon number, right? We also had Joe Montana.
it's like,
Now-
yo, chill.
A couple years ago, you may recall the two teams that Joe Montana played for played in the Super Bowl. That was the Chiefs and the 49ers. Now, Joe Montana was born on a Monday, which is the day named after the moon. And his name has Mon in it, right? Now, in the year 1979 is when Joe Montana was drafted. And I'm going to show you something that'll blow your mind. In 1979, there was one total solar eclipse, right? Come on, website, work with me. All right, so we had one total eclipse, and it was on the date, the 26th of February. And look at Montana in Gematria, 26/2 in the Latin cipher.
Mm-hmm.
And this eclipse was just a few months before he was drafted. And look at where the eclipse was.
Montana.
It literally split Montana in half.
Oh my God.
Joe Montana, dude.
So on the date of the Montana Bowl, we called it the Montana Bowl because it was the 49ers and the Chiefs for Super Bowl 54.
Oh,
Remember, this was a week after Kobe died. And if you look up Joe Montana, he was born on 6/11/56, which means on the date of the Montana Bowl, which was 2/2/2020, he was exactly 3,321 weeks old. Again, a tribute to the magic square of the moon.
good Lord.
So this is the moon. We have a 9 by 9 square. This brings us to Mercury. Now you might think, wait a minute, isn't Venus closer than Mercury? Well, on average, no. Actually, Mercury is closer. In fact, Mercury is the closest planet on average to every other planet. So in this one, it's an 8x8 square. And it just so happens to take Mercury 88 days to orbit the sun.
Wow.
Now here, we get a total sum of 2,080, right? And there's 64 squares. Now Mercury is supposed to be the planet of communication, messaging, traveling, right? New ideas, things like that. I happen to be a Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury, and my birthday is 6/4, right? Like 64, the number of squares in the magic square of Mercury. But what's really trippy is that using the square number cipher, think about how this is the magic square, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get a sum of 2,080, which is the 64th triangular. And my name is Derek Tikkuri, which equals 2,080.
Wow.
Right? And then you have the 142 and 182. And here I'm teaching Gematria, 142, and Synchronicity, which is 182 in ordinal. So, yeah, just a little exhibit of how this is connected to this organic side too. Like, I remember I opened up a Discord that was exclusive to like only people who had numerology blogs that, you know, whose work I liked. And we were in close communication for a couple months and everything was going great. And all of a sudden there was this weird spat where someone like sent me a message they weren't supposed to. And it wasn't really a dig at me, but it was something he didn't want me to see. And I was like, really, dude, you're going to put that up? And, you know, he leaves the Discord, he's all embarrassed and stuff. And I'm like, to the other guy in the chat, I was like, can you email him and tell him it's fine? I don't care. And he's like, don't worry, this is the Mercury retrograde. It just started yesterday. You guys are both Geminis, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, whoa, that's creepy.
And we're in Venus retrograde currently. And I felt that there was yesterday is when it started, I believe. And I don't remember. Yesterday I was thinking about it, but I thought that something interesting. I felt something interesting. Real quick to go back on like your name, Gematria. I found personally that 8 has always been my lucky number. Actually, would you mind just typing this in and we can just show it briefly?
Sure.
We'll go, and I went with my common name, common yet full name. So Chad, C-H-A-D, Henry. We can do that too. Or was it Charles Henry Wessel?
Well, I have Chad Henry in now.
Try Charles briefly.
Ooh. I like that.
But born on October 8th, 1997 at 12:05 a.m.
Okay.
And so
you were born in the 725th minute of the day. That's my favorite number to say. Just wanted to say that. Go ahead.
Perfect. When I was looking at this, I was looking at the numerology of October 8th, and when I was adding up the numbers, at least the first one, 10/8/1997, I was like, okay, there's 8. Then you got your next 8, then your next 8. October is the original 8th month. 12:05 a.m. equals 8. I think maybe in like basic in like the full reduction, Chad Wessel Camper, whichever one of my names, came out to 8 in the first 4 totally reduced ordinals.
Yeah, in reverse, your name reduces to 8 with your basic standard name.
Where did it come in?
But like what you just said are good observations, right? We were born on the 8th, October, 8th, and these numbers all reduced. They all reduced to 8. They have the same numerology. So 1 + 3 + 4 is 8. 4 + 4 is 8. So it's 3 + 5.
Mom and dad both born on the 8th.
Really?
I think. Yeah.
Okay.
So I just found that interesting that there was even still a lot of 8 in the numerology. And one interesting thing that I found, I'm not saying that this is relevant necessarily, but still interesting enough because you spawned me onto it. In 1997, there was one total solar eclipse, and I believe it was March 9th.
March 9th. Yeah, the day that Biggie died. And look at Biggie.
Right. Yeah, because I was watching that video and I was losing my shit because I was like, whoa, the night prior I was studying the eclipse of March 9th because I was just trying to see.
Synchronicity.
Yes, exactly. And I was trying to see what was going on. I was like, let me just see if I can find some interesting things in my life. So I took the year I was born, and then I paired it with the year my dad died in 2016. And in 2016, I was noticing on the eclipse, I was like, wait, I'm seeing something similar. There's also a total solar eclipse on March 9th of 2016.
A Metonic cycle apart, yep.
Yes, and so I had listened to some stuff that you were saying. Now, he didn't die in March. He actually died October 27th of 2016. But
19 days after your birthday?
Yeah.
19 years later? Were you 19 years and 19 days old?
I don't know. I think I was 18. Oh God. Which is 8.
Well,
like if you went 9 minus 1, you still,
you could.
That's crazy.
Well, the 1919, this is a big number, man. 1919 I teach about.
And I didn't even see that.
I talked about the 1331 eclipse a little bit. Like, because when you write out 1331 eclipse, it's 1331, and it was on November 30th. And November 30th is 11/3, right? And 11 to the 3rd is 1331. So like there's so many strong connections here. But when you write out 1,331, it comes to 1919. And there's 19 years in the Metonic cycle of the moon. So this is a number that's connected to time. And if you look in Greek isopsephy, like moon, time, all these words connected to it are 19 or 109. And Zach Hubbard, who I learned Gematria from, he was even born on 1919, like 7:19 p.m. And his birthday even has 13 and 31 numerology, right? 1331. So I see the number 19 all the time in like these organic events, so to speak.
Jesus.
Yeah.
I did not even see that, so that was very weird.
Can we try a deep dive, a real quick one? Because I tried real brief to do it with my name. The problem is I don't know the time I was born. And I'm not even very sure what my exact legal name is for political reasons because of the Soviet Union, blah, blah, blah.
I got you.
But, so I don't know where to start. But maybe if you can type it in, Derek, and then using your brilliant mind, maybe something can be revealed. But I was born on November 20, 92.
How many days are between your birthdays? 322 days between your birthdays.
Hell yeah.
You bonesman, you.
And real quick, while we're just here for Synchronicity, it was really cool the way Armin and I met. We, we didn't know each other at all, and this was probably 3 or 4 years ago. But just because we're both musicians. But you were living in Dallas?
Yeah.
Or were you in Houston at that
When?
When we met. When we did the wedding.
Dallas.
So he was living in Dallas anyway. But what I thought was funny was that we were going to play somebody's wedding private party, just guitar and bass, jazz duo. I looked at his profile. I was like, oh boy, I feel like he's going to vibe me. He's probably going to be really good. Obviously it was really good, but I was just nervous. And then I came in. It was cool. We played, and I was like, wow, he doesn't look like everybody else. That's interesting. But then we took a break, and then we were just sitting at this table on our break, and we started talking in hushed tones, as I would say, about the world. And I was like, this is it. And then it's been ever since. So it was very synchronistic, completely.
I think everyone needs someone on their own vibration, whether it's a friend, family member, a loved one, whatever. Like that's so important to have. If only to keep you based a little bit as you kind of go through the journey,
Yeah. Derek, can we try something?
Yeah.
Can we go to your calculator and let's put in my commonly written version of my name?
I will. I just want to quick point out.
Yes.
You have primary birth numerology of 142, which is that Gematria number that's connected to my name that I just pointed out, 142.
Oh.
And just this past weekend, I was on a podcast with 2 guys. One of their names was 142. And the other one had 142 birth numerology. I was like, this is amazing.
Wow.
So also notice the 52, which is your life lesson number 52.
What?
Yeah, 142 and 52. And you'll see a lot of alignments because these are always going to reduce to the same.
Okay.
Like 1 + 4 + 2 is 7, and this will always equal 7, and so will that. It's the same thing over here, right? You're going to get the same reduction, sort of 142
Okay.
and 52, but to get that double alignment is pretty cool.
Yeah. Wow.
Dang. Okay, yeah, we might have to do like 10 more podcasts. Okay, let's try my name real quick. So the common one is E-N, A-R-M-E-N, and then M-O-V-S-E-S-Y-A-N. Yeah.
All right, well, I'll let you pronounce it.
Armin Movsesian.
Obsessive, okay. So where can I see the 8 somewhere, I thought? All right. Well, I mean, this is just part of a larger tapestry that we're looking at.
Yeah.
Kind of curious what the last name is. Okay. And then do you think you have like a legal middle name, or
What would it be?
Well, there's actually a hyphen to my first name that I leave out a lot because nobody understands it. So if you put Armin and then what's this?
Hyphen.
It's a hyphen, right?
Hyphen.
Armin hyphen G-U-R-G-E-N.
256. So okay, so he's got the 256 in extended,
Uh-huh.
and then yours is 256 ordinal.
Ordinal.
Damn.
So that's a cool alignment. 256 is 16 squared.
Okay.
So it's like a power of 2. It's 2 to the 8.
To the 8th.
2 to the 8. Yeah.
Wow.
There's that 8 again.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do a couple more podcasts. Yeah, I feel like we could just go on and on. Like there's no end to this.
Yeah, look at your name here. 2101, right?
Mm.
And your birthday is 2011, as it's written internationally.
Oh,
So
20.
your name literally equals your birthday.
Ah.
Yeah, because we dropped the zeros, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for the purpose of numerology,
yeah.
this
Mhm.
is. I mean, or you could even say it's the same digits. You just move the 0.
Right.
One to the side, but yeah, that's important. I would say that's huge, actually.
No.
How would you, okay, tell me why that is huge. Is it because the more specific it is, or the more right in there, without having to look for anything in particular?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the way I see it is that, each of these ciphers is connected to the alphabetic order in a way. The further you get from the alphabetic order cipher, like the less relevant it may be.
Mm-hmm.
So you notice when we talk about Gematria, I'm almost always looking at the alphabetic order. Like, that's the big thing to me. And then reduction's huge, but then these other reverse ones are more complementary. So I actually, like, from a natural organic side, I don't find as much in these methods. It typically is ordinal and reduction.
Okay.
Now, English extended, this essentially is the same as, structured the same as Hebrew and Greek Gematria. It's the same thing. So some people could even say this is a more pure cipher than ordinal, based on the 1 through 9, 10 through 90, 100 through 800. So the fact that your birthday is literally the same digits as your full name in that cipher, like, yeah, usually there's something that stands out to me right away, and then things, patterns reveal themselves over time. So this is that thing that sticks out right away. It's like the first thing I would mention.
Say that one more time because there was a noise. So why did it stand out to you? Just say it one more time for me, please.
Well, I mean, when you have your date of birth, which are like typically the first numbers that people think of being associated with them, people don't know their birth numerology down here, right? Okay. People typically just know their birthday and what those numbers are.
Mm-hmm.
So for your full name, at least as far as you know it and understand it, to have the same digits in the same order as your birthday. Yeah. And again, the date can be written different internationally, but you have international ancestry, it sounds like. So
yes.
So yeah, I mean, with I consider this a primary cipher. So for that to match your birthday, it's just the first thing that stands out to me.
Gotcha.
as far as patterns go.
Wow.
Chad, is there anything else you want to say?
And
You
then
know,
look at Chad's, by the way. Wait. He's got the 112, which 11/20 is your birthday. So it's
Mm-hmm.
you guys were coded definitely to kind of find each other, be on the wavelength, to grow. That's I just don't have any doubt about that.
There you go.
That's so interesting.
And this 283, by the way, this is a prime number. And I spent a lot of time talking about 666. In Latin Gematria, this number, when you write out 666, it's 2083. And would you believe that this is the 314th prime number? Right?
Wow. Uh-huh.
And when you write out the moon, you get 283, because 666 is like the ultimate number of the moon. So
What prime
whenever I see
number?
the 283, it's the 61st prime.
61st prime.
Yeah, and the moon is the keeper of time, which is 61.
Wow. Wow.
And then you have the 108. Your birthday is 10/8.
Right.
And 10/8 is like a huge number, because the moon is 108 times its diameter from the Earth. The sun is 108 times its diameter from the Earth, and the sun is 108 times wider than the Earth. So when you write out full moon, it sums to 108 and 108. That's when all three are in direct alignment with each other.
Also,
Geometry also.
Full moon was yesterday? Day before?
Oh, I lost track, but yeah, I think you're right.
Pretty sure it was yesterday, technically, or the day before, but it's also important because of the retrograde and everything that we went into.
Yeah, it was 2 nights ago, December 18th was new moon, full moon.
And that was also the start of Saturnalia.
Right. So Saturnalia goes from the 17th through the 23rd. And the planet Saturn equals 1723.
Oh, God. So wild. Well, man, as Armin said, I feel like, we could just keep talking about all sorts of stuff, but maybe, Derek, if you're interested, we would love to have you back on in the future and really just stay connected in general.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I'm kind of on a rotation with several different podcasts. Like I've done a lot, but usually it's once, and then some people are like, "We gotta have you back."
Oh, totally.
Yeah, that's fine. I enjoy talking about this stuff, clearly. So. And
I listened to you on, I forget the guy's podcast. You're on it like 3 times. He's really
Chance,
cool.
You talking about Chance?
Yeah, Chance.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really cool one. That was really good. But is there anything before you go that you want to tell the people who are listening where they can like support you or stuff like that? Obviously, we'll link a bunch of stuff to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not terribly hard to find. If you type in like Gematria calculator, it'll be one of the first results on Google, the Gematrinator. Gematrinator, Gematrininator. And the website has links to pretty much everything. If you go to recent content, you can see links to the blog. I also have my blog linked there. There's also media pages like YouTube. I got to rearrange this a little bit, but it's the same thing at YouTube, Gematrinator _85. That's my birth year, 85. And then I also have a Twitter where I occasionally put little snippets of info out. I'm going to be ramping up work on this in the next coming months here, but yeah, I mean, I'd say by summer, the website's going to be revamped a little bit. So people are going to be able to support the work on there and also gain access to various decoding tools that'll kind of help people's decodes out, it'll sort of massage the numbers for you and show you alignments that you may have missed, things like that. So for a long time, I've been doing this for completely free and everything. And a lot of my work still will be free, but I want to devote as much time as I can to this and keep the word out, make as many videos. So, people have been asking about supporting and continuing this. So I want to give something back. I don't want to just have people pay to support me to work. So once that's launched, the work will pick up. I'm going to start doing more like personal numerology readings. And these are not like your traditional readings, but more like the pattern recognition that we kind of showed.
Very good idea.
Birthdays and stuff. And, for instance, you mentioned both your parents were born on the 8th day of the month.
Yeah.
And then you were born on the 8th of the month. What are the odds of that? So I guarantee you there's a strong riddle with the number of months from your birthday to your parents. probably connected their names. Like, I've done maybe 20, 25 of these personal decodes. Not one person has not had their mind blown. So, this is something we'll be doing in the coming year, and I'm still kind of perfecting it or getting better at it myself. But that's something I want to offer to people, and kind of, just kind of give them the nudge they need, because again, a lot of people get freaked out by this knowledge, but for me, it's about showing people how, despite all this negativity that's out there, all these bad and evil things that are coded by the numbers, there's also a force that's supporting them as well, right? It's not just bad, it's not just evil. Like, we are equipped with certain powers, and to me, evidence of that is through the numerology. How could we be so aligned for our own name and birthday and whatnot, and not have a purpose? You know what I mean? There's something stronger to it. So, it's strange, because occasionally I get emails from people who say, you got to get away from this divination stuff and get closer to Jesus. It's like, well, I do talk about Jesus and how it's that spiritual energy helped save me and guide me to what I'm doing now. People email me all the time saying, wow, like, I kind of believed in God, but now I definitely know there's a God. What about those people? It's just fascinating to see the dichotomy of opinions, because something so new, something that, let's be honest, it's shocking kind of when you first see it, how these things align so well. But to me, it's about, and I'm along the same lines, right? Like, I always believed in God and I wanted to have a reason, but just reading the Bible wasn't enough, and now I'm like infused with this energy based on my investigation to bring this new thing into the world, or help bring this new thing. And I think it shows people many positives in addition to what negatives there are out there.
I think that's so beautifully said, and I'm on the same page. I know Chad is. It's like, the more we are awakened to the beautiful nature of this world and our existence, it's like pretty much undeniable that there is an entity or an overarching God spirit that's going on, and that's also strengthened. And one last thing for you, Derek. My mother's birthday is the day before his mother's birthday.
Oh, yeah.
Like the same year? Or
not the same year, same month. So, and they also happen to be extremely similar personalities.
Mm-hmm.
So they probably have the same sign on top of that.
Yeah. Both Sagittarius.
Okay, right on. That's cool,
What's
man.
your dad's birthday?
It's wild. Like, the friend of mine who's helped me probably the most in my decoding on the blog and in the channel, he was born exactly 150. What was it? I'm sorry, 100 and... I'm going to punch this in. Hang on.
Okay.
Because it's kind of important, but not so much. 105 weeks, that's right. So when I found his birthday, it blew me away, because the first friend of mine who I moved in with, like when I was 18, I moved out with a roommate, and he was born exactly 105 weeks before me. And now I have this decoding friend who was born 105 weeks after me. We're all Gemini.
Wow.
And his name in Gematria equals 69. His full name, he was born on 6/9.
Whoa.
His full name also equals 9/11, and then his common name is 1331, which are like all these big numbers I commonly talk about.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's more to that, but I in fact, several of the people who I consider to be the best decoders are Gemini. And then the other friend of mine who I started working with, he's a Virgo, which is the other sign ruled by Mercury. So those who say astrology is hogwash clearly do not observe the reality around them enough, I think. Because, I mean, you can say what you want about how signs are coded and, sidereal versus synodic and whatnot, but there's something to it, absolutely. I have no doubt.
Wow. Well, appreciate everything, Derek. I thought,
thanks for having me on.
We had so much to talk about. So happy that you responded. And, everybody who's watching, please go to Derek's YouTube channel and website and support him in any way you can. Obviously, we'll link everything in the description. It's a very liberating thing. Is there anything you want to say?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Derek, please consider the glossary pamphlet or booklet or something like that. Like, I'm gonna be right there, and I'll pretty much tell everybody to buy that as soon as you
totally
get it. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. And thanks to you guys, because for someone like me who understands that this is all about waking up the younger generation, right? And now I have guys 12 years younger than me who are interviewing me. Like, this is awesome for me as well, because the old guard is going to die off soon, and we got to bring about this new world in the right way, so to speak. So to be able to share this with younger generation, and there's always a strong correlation between musicians, I've noticed too. Like, I started out as a musician electronically, 15, 16 years ago. And there's something to be said for being on the wavelengths of music. And, there's similar patterns in life itself. Like, I've noticed that very strong ties between interests in both topics.
Totally.
Yep.
Well, Derek, we will talk to you soon. We're going to send you the finished product when it's done. And have a wonderful rest of your day. We're going to stay in touch, no doubt. Have a beautiful rest of your Saturnalia.
All right, Chad. Armin, you too, man. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you so much.
All right.